Film fandom can be a wonderful thing, a joyous appreciation of life-enriching entertainment, but as we've seen so many times, sometimes that enthusiasm gives way to embarrassing, if not worrying, obsessiveness. Rather than stay pragmatic and consider what an unexpected actor could bring to the role, the internet tends to veer towards doom and gloom with disturbing efficiency. Now, to be clear, sometimes the fans are actually right, no matter the petulant way they go about it, and sometimes an actor is indeed totally wrong for a part. But more often than not, fandoms end up blowing peculiar castings wildly out of proportion to the extent that it embarrasses the overall fanbase, and if the casting pays off in the end, everyone looks mighty silly in retrospect. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and this is 10 movie casting decisions that fans couldn't handle. Number 10. Chris Evans as Captain America, in Captain America: The First Avenger. Casting Captain America was one of the most important tasks in the early days of the MCU, given that he'd ultimately become a cornerstone of the franchise for almost a decade. And so when Chris Evans landed the part, fans were wildly divided. At the time, Evans was largely known to audiences for his gregarious role as Johnny Storm in Fantastic Four, and there wasn't that much indication that the star of not another teen movie could match the earnest heroism of his comic book counterpart. With Ryan Philippe and John Krasinski among the final contenders for the role, many felt that Evans was a misguided pick, and we'd later learned that Evans himself even turned down the role a few times for fear of being locked into a restrictive contract. But did it work out? Obviously. By the end of the first Avengers first act, even hardened cynics were surely sold, with Evans nailing both Rogers' salt-of-the-earth likability and the more exuberant, muscle-bound physicality of Captain America himself. Evans went on to become one of the MCU's most popular characters, second only to Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, and enjoyed a lengthy tenure which met a poignant conclusion in Avengers Endgame. Number 9. Kristen Stewart as Snow White, in Snow White and the Huntsman. As much intrigue as there was surrounding a gritty new Snow White movie in the vein of The Dark Knight, hope was almost immediately quashed when Kristen Stewart was cast as the iconic heroine. Stewart, who was in the midst of wrapping up her tenure in the Twilight franchise at the time, came across as a cynical choice motivated solely by the financial success of Twilight rather than her suitability to the role. More to the point, the internet at large felt that Stewart was just too plain to play a character as uniformly beautiful as Snow White, a problem exacerbated by the casting of Charlize Theron as the evil Queen Ravenna. But did it work out? No, but it wasn't a total disaster. Stewart's performance turned out more forgettable than bad, predictably outshone by Theron, making her rendition of Snow White ultimately feel a little bit too flat. Unsurprisingly, Stewart opted not to return for the god-awful 2016 prequel/sequel The Huntsman Winter's War, with Snow White only appearing via brief archive footage of Stewart herself from the first movie. Number 8. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine in X-Men. Turns out Russell Crowe was actually the first choice to play Wolverine in the original X-Men movie, but he turned it down in favor of recommending his friend Hugh Jackman. Jackman's casting was immediately controversial with fans though, given that the actor had precious few film roles under his belt at the time. Jackman also didn't match the comic book Wolverine one bit, and if you do some digging around online, you can still find 20-year-old evidence of fans freaking the F out over such a casting. Did it work out though? Unquestionably. Jackman may not have been hugely physically imposing in the first X-Men, but he brought heaps of charm to the table, quickly establishing himself as the most popular X-Men movie character. Jackman further developed and elevated the role over almost 2 decades of sequels and spin-offs, where he packed on the muscle to dominate the screen. This all culminated with his universally acclaimed final performance as Wolverine in 2017's immaculate Logan. Number 7. Tom Cruise as Jack Reacher in Jack Reacher. Tom Cruise is no stranger to being embroiled in contentious casting. What with Interview with a Vampire's own author Anne Rice initially deeming him miscast as Lestat, and many considering him unsuited to play German Army Colonel von Stauffenberg in 2008's Valkyrie. But Cruise's most recent controversy occurred when he was cast as Jack Reacher in Christopher McQuarrie's 2012 adaptation of Lee Child's thriller One Shot. In the novel series, Jack Reacher is a military police vet with blonde hair and blue eyes. But more importantly, he's 6 feet 5 inches tall and weighs between 210 and 250 pounds. Now, it doesn't take a detective to figure out that Cruise is a far cry from every single one of those attributes, what with his dark hair, green eyes, mere height of 5 feet and 7 inches, and weighing in at around 150 pounds. Fans were not buying it and went into the film with a strong air of skepticism. But did it work out? Yes and no. Cruise gave a characteristically entertaining performance for sure, but never once did he feel like the Jack Reacher of the source material. Nevertheless, the film's success led to a pretty terrible sequel before Child decided to end the movie franchise and reboot Jack Reacher as a TV show. Child said recently of Cruise's work on the films, the idea is that when Reacher walks into a room, you're all a little nervous just for that first minute. And Cruise, for all his talent, didn't have that physicality. All in all, Cruise was totally fine under the circumstances, but fans deserve better than such a loose, unfussed treatment of an incredibly popular character. Number 6, Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight. And now we come to pretty much the holy grail of unexpected casting that was initially reviled by fans. Despite rumors that Paul Bettany would be cast as the Joker for Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, the part eventually went to Heath Ledger, to the baffled bemusement of just about everybody, including me at the time. Ledger, who was best known for his performances in movies like 10 Things I Hate About You and A Knight's Tale, not to mention his Oscar-nominated turn in Brokeback Mountain, was pretty much the polar opposite of who anyone expected. But did it work out? Well, though Ledger tragically passed away before his performance hit screens, it became clear from the release of the film's first trailer that he was going to defy all expectations, delivering a daring, powerful rendition of the character. Ultimately, Ledger's freewheeling interpretation became the film's most distinctive and widely praised aspect, going on to win a posthumous Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Number 5, Scarlett Johansson as the Major in Ghost in the Shell. For as long as cinema has existed, Hollywood has been guilty of whitewashing characters to cynical ends, shoehorning whiter-than-white brand names into roles that, by all rights, should be played by people from the character's actual race or ethnicity. Case in point, Scarlett Johansson being cast as the Major in Hollywood's big-budget adaptation of Ghost in the Shell. In the manga, the character was Japanese, and many felt that casting a white American actress was insulting, if not downright offensive. And did it work out? Hell no. Though Johansson was fine enough, the script misguidedly attempted to fold the whitewashing controversy into the plot, revealing in Act 3 that Johansson's shell housed the soul of the original Japanese woman, Motoko Kusanagi. Some saw this as an ambitious attempt to confront the controversy head-on, but most thought it was just rubbing salt in the wound, the filmmakers whitewashing their movie only to make a half-assed attempt at justifying why. Number 4, Idris Elba as Heimdall in Thor. Back when Idris Elba was cast as Asgardian sentry Heimdall in Thor, the MCU faced one of its first early casting controversies. Turns out a white supremacist group had mounted a campaign to boycott the film on the grounds that a Norse god would ever be black, given their European ancestry. This sparked a general debate about race-blind casting in movies, though Elba himself quite rightly laughed the whole thing off, calling it ridiculous that anyone would whine about a cast member's race in a movie with so many willfully ridiculous elements. And did it work out? Absolutely. Nobody with a fully functioning brainstem cared that Heimdall was black, and though the part was relatively underwritten throughout his MCU run, Elba did a great job with what he had. Number 3, Zoe Saldana as Nina Simone in Nina. After Mary J. Blige had to drop out of playing Nina Simone in Cynthia Mort's biopic, she was replaced with Zoe Saldana. A tidal wave of controversy ensued once the first set pictures made their way online, depicting Saldana in garish prosthetics and having her skin tone changed to more closely resemble the legendary singer. The issue was ultimately twofold. Saldana's casting felt like a cynical attempt to lend the movie a brand name above all other priorities, given that Saldana's facial structure is nothing like Simone's, hence the prosthetics, to say nothing of her lighter skin tone. Even Simone's family chimed in, calling Saldana's casting, and I quote, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, nauseating, and soul-crushing. Did it work out? Not remotely for anyone involved. Saldana really tried to make it work, but her lack of resemblance to Simone was distracting, as were the attempts to make her more so, and the film itself was a woefully generic biopic. Released more than 3 years after principal photography had wrapped, the film was a box office dud, and is currently rocking a brutal 2% on Rotten Tomatoes. Number 2, Michael Keaton, George Clooney, Ben Affleck, and Robert Pattinson as Batman in Batman 89, Batman and Robin, Batman vs Superman, and The Batman. Perhaps no prominent role in the pantheon of pop culture has been so routinely whined about as that of Batman, which speaks just as much to the finicky nature of hardcore comic book fandom as it does the Caped Crusaders' popularity. First up, we have Michael Keaton, who prompted 50,000 complaint letters to Warner Bros. After being cast in Tim Burton's 1989 Batman. Best known for his comedic roles prior to casting, many fans just didn't believe he could go to the dark places necessary for the character. His successor Val Kilmer actually fared relatively well, as aside from his well-earned reputation for being difficult on set, there didn't seem to be too many complaints about him taking up the mantle. But when George Clooney took the reins for Batman and Robin, the knives came back out, with many fans questioning why that guy from ER was suddenly being cast as Batman. Up next, fans were relatively confident about Christian Bale's casting in Batman Begins for the most part, saving up all their hateful energy to complain about Heath Ledger's Joker. Yet a veritable storm unfolded online when Ben Affleck was unexpectedly cast as the DCEU's Batman, citing Affleck's failure as Daredevil in his 2003 movie as the cause for so much outrage. And finally, with the recent news that Warner Bros. Is looking to close a deal with Robert Pattinson to play the superhero in Matt Reeves' The Batman, a number of petitions have already started doing the rounds begging Warner Bros. To pick somebody else. Though, did it work out? Well, Keaton absolutely knocked it out of the park, and despite Tim Burton's filmmaking eccentricities, he nailed the deranged nature of Bruce Wayne better than anyone else. Clooney was a complete wash though, in large part due to the film being absolutely horrendous, but also because Clooney gave a depressingly one-note, charisma-free performance. Affleck though did a wonderful job with what he had, but he was ultimately hamstrung by the material and ended up bailing out of the DCEU far sooner than fans wanted him to. As for Pattinson, we'll have to wait and see, but given his clear talents as an actor, it's certainly an ambitious and exciting casting pick, assuming that it does indeed stick. Number 1. Renee Zellweger as Bridget Jones in Bridget Jones's Diary. When it came to casting the titular lead in the movie adaptation of Helen Fielding's acclaimed novel Bridget Jones's Diary, Universal were originally looking at a host of English and Australian actresses, including Helena Bonham Carter, Kate Blanchett, Emily Watson, Rachel Weisz, and Toni Collette. Yet the 2-year casting search concluded with the producers selecting American actress Renee Zellweger, who was born in Texas. With a figure unlike the books and vocal skepticism over her ability to convincingly do a British accent, fans were infuriated, stirred up no end by relentless tabloid coverage of the casting itself. Many felt that, just as James Bond is traditionally reserved for British actors, bar a few exceptions, so too should Bridget Jones have cast an actress from the UK. But did it work out? Absolutely. Zellweger took the part seriously, gaining 20 pounds to more closely resemble Bridget as written, and working with an accent coach, she sounded pretty convincing as a Brit. All told, she knocked the role out of the park, and should viewers be unaware of Zellweger's origins, they'd likely never even guess that she wasn't British. The film was a smash hit with critics and audiences, leading to 2 successful sequels. And that is my list. Let me know down in the comments if there were any other movie castings that kind of threw you for a loop only to prove themselves in the end or not. I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.